Mock draft season has officially arrived. I'll go through Corey Pronman's mock top 16 to see who he has the Blackhawks selecting at number 3.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Going on, Blackhawks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On today's episode, I'll go through Corey Pronman's mock top 16 following the NHL draft lottery. I'll also dive through general manager Kyle Davidson's comments on the Blackhawks' ongoing coaching search before wrapping things up in segment 3 with Tyler Bertuzzi's 24-25 season preview. Real quick though, a reminder first to please go and hit that like button, hop in the comment section below, and to subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. I know I'm getting a lot of new viewers here on the channel with the NHL draft stuff about to ramp up. If you're someone who regularly enjoys the content that I post on this channel, please make sure to go and hit that subscribe button and go and follow my strictly Blackhawks account on X as well, at Talkin' Hockey. That way you don't miss out on any of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. But happy Wednesday, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. To open things up on the show here today, with the 2025 NHL draft lottery now having came and went, the real fun of the offseason is about to begin here, Blackhawks fans, as starting early next week, right here on Locked On Blackhawks, I will begin my 2025 NHL draft profiles, going through every top prospect in this year's draft class and talking about their strengths, their weaknesses, their upside, and everything in between. And the reason I do this, Blackhawks fans, is not only for all of you out there to get more familiar with all of these prospects and to just get a little bit more accustomed to what they bring to the table, but it's also for myself as well. As someone who spends, basically 12 months of the year nonstop covering the Chicago Blackhawks, as well as what's going on with their minor league affiliate Rockford Ice Hogs, and not to mention all of their prospects in the CHL, NCAA, USHL, over in Europe, whatever it may be. And because of that, it just makes it really hard to keep up with every single player in this year's draft class. So, well, yes, I do have a good idea about most of these kids' skill set and who I want the Blackhawks to pick at number 3. I'm going to wait to give out my final answer until I just learn more about every single one of these prospects. Plus, it's also been helpful considering Kyle Davidson, since taking over as general manager, has been very active and made lots of trades at the NHL draft. So even if it seems like I'm covering a range where the Blackhawks don't have a pick, you never know what's going to happen. Perfect example, my first year being a host of this show, the 2021 NHL draft, the Blackhawks, I believe, had the 6th, 7th, or 8th pick, something like that year, and I was really heavily researching the top 10. Well, what happens? They trade that pick for Seth Jones to the Columbus Blue Jackets, wind up selecting 32nd overall, and I had no clue about anyone in that range. So I make sure to go through from start to finish, and even littering into the second round, every single prospect, so that me and you are just a little bit more familiar with all of these kids. And based on, the comments that I get on YouTube, the interactions I get for those of you tuning in through audio platforms, I truly believe this is one of the best segments I do right here on Locked On Blackhawks. But not only last night did we find out the Hawks, or I guess I should say on Monday night, did we find out the Blackhawks will be selecting 3rd in this year's draft. We also learned where each of their other selections will come as well. After the Blackhawks make their first selection in the 2025 draft at number 3, they'll be back on the clock in the first round at number 29, thanks to a trade they made a couple of years ago with the Toronto Maple Leafs when they sent Sam Lafferty and Jake McCabe up there. This had the potential to be pushed to the 2026 NHL draft, as it was a top 10 protected pick, but with the Maple Leafs being one of the best teams in hockey this year, no worries of that. So the Blackhawks have 2 first-round selections under their belt once again here this year. Then they'll be back on the clock early in round 2, picking at number 34. And they also have a late pick in the second round, thanks to a trade they made with the Dallas Stars a couple of years ago when they traded Max Domi. The Hawks will be on the clock at number 60 in this year's draft. Won't take them long to be back on the clock again in the third round at number 66. And they also have 2 picks in the fourth round at number 98 and 107. No selection at the moment in round 5. They have the 162nd pick in round 6. And then wrapping things up, they'll be selecting 194th there in the 7th round. But as I said, Kyle Davidson been very active at the last few NHL drafts. So I think there's a good likelihood the Blackhawks are moving a couple of these picks before it's all said and done. But following Monday night's NHL draft lottery, that takes us officially into mock draft season, Blackhawks fans. And I'm going to be going through a handful of these over the next month and a half until the draft kicks off in late June. Some of them you got to take with a little bit of a grain of salt. I believe Corey Pronman was actually the man who had Frank Nazar, not even rated as a top 10 prospect in the Blackhawks pool, which is absolutely crazy. But it at least gives us an idea of what the top scouts and analysts in the industry are thinking at this point in time. So diving into Corey Pronman's mock top 16, not a full mock first round, but I expect that to be coming from him here soon. Kicking things off, the New York Islanders, who of course surprised everyone by jumping up from number 10 in the odds to steal the first overall selection. Corey Pronman has them taking left-handed defenseman Matthew Schaefer from the Erie Otters of the OHL. And I think this is the most likely outcome for the Isles at number 1. I mean, they need a lot to really turn the tides of their franchise, but the opportunity to go and get what most scouts and analysts believe is a top pairing defenseman, projects as potentially a number 1 as well, to go and start their rebuild. I think that's a really good beginning for the Islanders. And while Misa obviously lit it up in the OHL offensively, there are some debates about whether he's going to be a center or a wing at the next level. Not necessarily know precisely what his value will be depending, on the position. Centers are obviously more valuable than wings. So I think that leaves Matthew Schaefer firmly as the pick at number 1 for the Islanders. At number 2, the San Jose Sharks, Pronman has them selecting Michael Misa. I don't really see any world in which San Jose doesn't take Misa if Schaefer's the first one off of the board. As I've reiterated a couple of times on the show, pretty clear-cut top 2 in this year's draft class. I expect it to be Schaefer and then Misa, but regardless of the order, those 2 guys should hear their name called first and second in this year's draft. Next up, at number 3, drum roll please, Corey Pronman has the Chicago Blackhawks selecting Porter Martone, power forward winger from the Brampton Steelheads of the OHL, served as the captain of the club, and something I've talked about on the show a lot since taking over as the host has been the Blackhawks needing a player with size and skill in their top 6. They've been missing it for ages. I mean, since Marian Hossa, Brandon Saad, and Jonathan Toews in their heyday. And actually going back to 2019, Hawks fans, I know things obviously didn't work out with Kirby Dach here in Chicago, but because Dach had that 6'4" frame and brought a skill game, I understood why the Blackhawks made that selection. Again, it was a clear need of theirs up front, and it's still a clear need of theirs right here today. So Porter Martone definitely is going to be an interesting name for the Blackhawks at number 3. And based on the comments that I've seen in the last couple of days, seems like a top candidate according to most Blackhawks fans. At number 4, Pronman has the Utah Hockey Club selecting another player with size and skill, Caleb Denoyer, center from Moncton in the QMJHL, 6'2" center who put up some good offensive numbers in that league this year. Definitely think he's also someone the Blackhawks are mulling over at number 3. At number 5, Pronman has the Nashville Predators taking James Higgins, center out of Boston College. This is an interesting one because historically, the Predators like to go with more of a two-way player, more so someone who has size as well, who can be responsible defensively. And James Higgins can play a two-way game. He just doesn't have that size to go along with it and isn't a stereotypical like Nashville Predators center NHL draft pick. Now, I do believe at number 5, if he's still there, he would undoubtedly be the most skilled player and has the higher upside. So I do think that could change the mind of the Predators a little bit. But I do wonder if someone like Anton Frondel, because of his mold, could be a little bit more intriguing to the Preds at number 5. But Pronman has them taking James Higgins. At number 6, though, he has the Philadelphia Flyers taking Anton Frondel out of the Hockey Allsvenskan League, the second-tier professional league over in Sweden. I've heard, from a couple of different reports that the Blackhawks are really looking hard at Anton Frondel. Honestly, for me personally, Blackhawks fans, and again, I still have to go through his draft profile to do all the fine tuning, but Anton Frondel, for me personally, isn't someone that really moves the needle. Let me know in the comment section below if you think that's crazy or if you agree with me on that take. At number 7, Pronman next has the Boston Bruins selecting Jake O'Brien, center from the Brantford Bulldogs. And the Chicago Blackhawks got a ton of good looks at this kid this season, considering Nick Lardis and Marek Vanacker, 2024 first-round selection, both also played for Brantford. I think it's probably a long shot for O'Brien to go at number 3. I think he's more likely to go somewhere between 5 and 7, but I do believe whoever takes him is going to be getting a real solid player. At number 8, the Seattle Kraken select Radek Murtka, right-handed defenseman out of Seattle. Completely butchered his name, did my autocorrect. Second defenseman off of the board. The first right-handed defenseman goes to Seattle at number 8. At number 9, the Buffalo Sabres. Pronman has them selecting Brady Martin, a center out of the Sioux Greyhounds in the OHL. Martin is actually someone a couple of people in my comment section have brought up in the last couple of days. At number 10, Pronman has the Anaheim Ducks selecting Roger McQueen, center out of the Brandon Wheat Kings, 6'5" frame. Unfortunately, dealt with a back injury this past year and played fewer than 20 games. And last year, Caden Lindstrom, of course, was dealing with a back injury. He went on not to play a single game this past season. I do think that's going to cause some teams to be a little bit worried about Roger McQueen, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him fall outside of the top 10. And if that does wind up being the case, I wonder if the Blackhawks could be kicking the tires to think about moving up and taking this kid. While there obviously is some concern and some injury risk, 6'5" at the center ice position doesn't come around all that often. And again, the Blackhawks certainly need size and skill, more of that up front. At number 11, the Pittsburgh Penguins select Jackson Smith, left-handed defenseman out of Tri-City in the WHL. That would make him the second left-handed defenseman off of the board. At number 12, the Rangers select Jack Nesbitt, center out of the Windsor Spitfires. Blackhawks also probably got some good looks at him, considering he's a teammate of 2024 third-round pick AJ Spellacy. At number 13, the Detroit Red Wings select Victor Eklund, who also played in the Hockey Allsvenskan League like Anton Frondel over in Sweden. I know Eklund is a winger, and Anton Frondel is a center iceman. Like I said a moment ago, center icemen are always going to be valued higher. But honestly, Victor Eklund's skills kind of intrigue me a little bit more than Anton Frondel's. By the way, though, if Eklund makes it to number 13, this is a slam dunk for the Detroit Red Wings, considering how Steve Yzerman historically likes to go about his draft picks. Hey, listen, maybe he changes up the Yzer plan, considering hasn't been looking so good these last couple of years, but like Michael Brandzack-Nygaard last year, right? Like, if Victor Eklund makes it here, the Detroit Red Wings are going to take him. They just can't help themselves by taking all of those Europeans. Maybe they finally differentiate from it. I actually don't think Victor Eklund is going to be there at number 13. But if he is, he's going to the Detroit Red Wings. At number 14, the Blue Jackets draft Kashawn Aitchison, defenseman out of Barrie. At number 15, Vancouver selects one of my favorite names in this year's draft class, Justin Cabinot, winger out of Blainville Boisbriand in the QMJHL. One of the only benefits of me taking French in middle school and high school is I can pronounce all these French-Canadian players' names, such as Sacha Boisvert, oui, oui. And then at number 16, to close things out for the Montreal Canadiens, who I also believe will be back on the clock at number 17. But Pronman, to close out his mock top 16, has Montreal selecting Carter Bear, left winger out of Everton in the WHL. It's going to be a lot of fun going through my NHL draft profiles starting early on next week, taking a look at the slew of players who are going to be in consideration for the Blackhawks at number 3. For me, right here, right now, Blackhawks fans, the 3 names that really catch my attention the most, Porter Martone, James Higgins, Caleb Denoyer. Those are really the 3 I'm personally looking at. But again, still want to go through every single one of these draft profiles to dive through every nook and crevice to learn everything I can about every one of these prospects before I come to my final decision. But there is Corey Pronman's mock top 16 following Monday's NHL draft lottery. I'll be going through a handful of more mock drafts here on the show just to give us a better idea of what the industry is thinking as we're less than 2 months away from the 2025 NHL draft. But coming up in just a moment, Blackhawks fans, stick with me during segment 2 as I'll get into some updates on NHL head coaches and GM Kyle Davidson speaking out on the Hawks' ongoing search. But first, real quick, I do got to talk to you all about Wonderful Pistachios. Are you looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Well, then go and crack into a great source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. And Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts, with each 1 ounce serving having 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily nutritional value. Plus, they're packed with fiber to help keep you feeling fuller longer. And who doesn't love a good pistachio, right? I know I certainly do. I could sit there literally eating them and cracking them all day long. And the satisfying crack of opening each shell, it's like a perfect mini little snack meditation. And whether you're someone who's running between meetings or dropping off the kids at school, Wonderful Pistachios are the snack that works as hard as you do. So get snackin' and get crackin' with the snack that packs a protein punch by visiting wonderfulpistachios.com in order to learn more. Again, that's wonderfulpistachios.com to check it out today. Segment 2, for the first time since his exit interview a couple of weeks ago, we got to hear from Blackhawks GM Kyle Davidson following the results of Monday's NHL draft lottery. Obviously, Davidson is someone who's 99.9% of the time upbeat and super positive during his interview. So he was all smiles. He was pretty happy with the Blackhawks coming away with pick number 3, despite them falling down 1 spot. However, the real comments that I wanted to talk about in segment 2 here today are his comments regarding the Blackhawks' ongoing head coaching search, which, as I've mentioned on the show, isn't exactly off to the ideal start, as Mike Sullivan has been hired by the New York Rangers. We know he's not on the market any longer. John Cooper isn't going to be leaving the Tampa Bay Lightning. And David Carle, of course, has already pulled his name out of the running. And speaking of David Carle, I should provide a quick update on him, as news broke just a couple of days ago that the 2-time NCAA champion head coach has signed a multi-year extension to remain the head honcho at Denver University. It's not too surprising to hear that news after he pulled his name from the Blackhawks job, but I definitely am surprised as a whole. Like, if you would have told me 5 months ago or whenever it was that we learned David Carle wasn't going to be returning to Team USA for next year's World Juniors, considering, there was all this buzz around him potentially moving to the NHL, probably, you never know what's going to happen these next few years, but probably as attractive as his name really could be as a college coach. You knew there were going to be a lot of suitors. Someone was going to throw him a pretty hefty bag to leave Denver. That is what is surprising to me. All of those announcements, I guess, and kind of just the overall buzz around David Carle. I really expected him to make the leap to the NHL, but once I heard him pull out from the Blackhawks job, and there were some people saying, if it's not going to be the Blackhawks, I'd be surprised to see it be anywhere else. I did mention a couple of days ago that Carle took an interview with the Anaheim Ducks, and it kind of had me wondering, is he thinking down on the Blackhawks job here? But knowing what we do now about Carle signing this extension makes a lot of sense. I guess just he and his family are pretty happy at Denver. That's where he's going to be staying for at least the next couple of years. But on top of David Carle staying with the Denver Pioneers, should also mention another team that plays in Colorado, the Avalanche, following them getting eliminated in painful fashion in Game 7 to the hands of Mikko Rantanen and the Dallas Stars, similar to what just happened last week with John Cooper and the Tampa Bay Lightning. After they got eliminated, there were some rumblings of whether Cooper could be canned by Tampa Bay, and kind of the same thing was happening to the Avs with Jared Bednar. But general manager Chris MacFarland spoke with the media yesterday and put that to rest pretty easily, saying 100% Bednar will be back with the Avalanche next year. So no Bednar, no Cooper, no Sullivan, no Carle. Not an ideal start to the Blackhawks coaching search for sure, even though Cooper and Bednar were always going to be long shots. Tampa and Colorado, each of them would have been crazy to fire either of those two guys. But we did get to hear at least from GMKD himself for the first time since this process officially got underway. And here's what Davidson had to say first about the timeline of the Blackhawks coaching hire. Quote, "No real timeline. We're going through the process right now. We're really excited about the people we've gotten to talk to and will get to talk to. It's not necessarily about timeline. We just want to get this right. And we want to make sure we have all the information to get it right. And that's what we're going through right now." A lot of typical NHL GM / NHL head coach / NHL player type of talk there, not really giving us a whole lot other than the first sentence, no real timeline. And while I definitely agree, you don't want to be rushing to this and go and make a quick decision before you're 100% confident in it. The only reason I bring this up is because during his exit interview, KD did give us a timeline, not a, clear cut one, but he said the organization would like to have this head coaching hire wrapped up earlier than they did with Luke Richardson, which I believe was in early June. So that just kind of gave me the idea the Blackhawks were really on top of things. And that's not to say that they're not right here, right now, but I think it's to me at least just a little bit obvious what's changed is their top two candidates. David Carle was definitely number one. I feel like Mike Sullivan was number two, and they were just kind of waiting to see what was going to happen with him in Pittsburgh. Now that they know neither of those guys are going to be their future head coach, they're kind of like, again, in my opinion, at least like really sifting through things a little bit more, because none of the rest of these guys were necessarily David Carle nor Mike Sullivan. A little bit concerning, I will say, as someone who reiterated a couple of days ago, like, hey, Kyle, you guys kind of got to get on this. And while, again, I agree it's important to take your time and make sure you absolutely get it right, because the Blackhawks have to get this one right, there also was something to be said about, like, taking too long, and some of these other teams might go and start snagging guys off of the market, and then you're just left with, like, only 3 or 4 true candidates. I just don't want that worst case scenario to become a reality here with the Blackhawks. So I really hope they do get on this sooner rather than later. Last quote I wanted to share from GMKD as well was regarding whether the team has prioritized certain qualities for the next head coach. Bear with me here, Blackhawks fans. This is a long one. Quote, "I think a coach working with younger players, that will be key because we're going to be a younger team moving forward. You saw a peak to that at the end of the season, but I don't necessarily think that has to color what we go out and get. We're going to talk to a bunch of very qualified candidates that we feel very passionate about. It's going to be determined in that room and in the interviews when it feels right, how they approach things, and if that's the right fit for us. In the end, we want someone that's going to come in and help these young players that we're very excited about, that we think have a ton of promise. They're going to need someone that's going to allow them to develop and allow them to grow. And through that, grow our status in the win column." That's something that's all connected. We're looking to check a number of boxes there, but ultimately want someone that's excited about what's going on in Chicago. Based on their reaction to my phone every day, it's an appealing job. We feel that. We know that, but we've got to find the right person that fits what we're doing, and that's kind of the course we're running right now. The real parts of that paragraph that stand out to me, the first sentence again, quote, "I think a coach working with younger players, that will be key because we're going to be a younger team." And just like, and also him saying, they're going to need someone that's going to allow them to develop and allow them to grow. To me, that kind of almost takes out some of the veteran coaches that have been recycled year in and year out, like Peter Laviolette, who I've mentioned a couple of times on the show. Maybe someone like Gerard Gallant, someone like Rick Tocchet, who, yes, is familiar with Arizona's rebuild, but it didn't really go all that swimmingly, as I pointed out. I personally think it would kind of take those guys out of the market because they're not necessarily known for their best coaching abilities aren't to coach youngsters. It's competitive teams to get them in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and the Blackhawks are just at a different point in their rebuild. So really, to me, and maybe I'm biased when thinking this Blackhawks fans because he's been someone in my top 3 for like this entire process, but to me, this screams Todd Nelson, right? Someone who's been at the AHL level developing players and had a ton of success doing it, right? Guys won 3 Calder Cup trophies the last 4 years he's been a coach in the AHL. He also has been around some really good NHL head coaches like Jim Montgomery, like Rick Bowness as an assistant with the Dallas Stars, has been coaching in general forever, right? I really think Todd Nelson is someone who checks most of those boxes that Kyle Davidson explained in that paragraph there. I think he is someone who's very familiar working with younger players and will be okay coaching a younger team that's kind of in this rebuild stage. He's very familiar with that type of level and someone who I believe knows how to properly develop and get the best out of players while also trying to win and improve the team at the same point in time. To me, Todd Nelson is really the candidate who I have in my mind that stood out when reading those comments from general manager Kyle Davidson. Let me know in the comment section which coaches come to your mind when you hear that from GMKD, or which coaches you really want to see the Blackhawks aggressively pursue to be their next bench boss. But there is the latest on the Blackhawks ongoing coaching search that I really hope is going to start ramping up here before we come to an end of May. But coming up in just a moment here, Blackhawks fans, before I wrap things up, still got to get into Tyler Bertuzzi's 24-25 season recap.
An award-winning mattress can change your life. I speak from experience. It happened to me. After years of uncomfortable sleeps, I recently switched to Bear Mattress, and the results were instant. Bear Mattress is designed with a focus on recovery, cooling, and pressure relief to upgrade your sleep and improve your overall quality of life. I used to deal with night sweats, but Bear's best-in-class cooling ensures optimal temperature regulation, which prevents overheating and helps me stay comfortable all night long. Bear offers a wide variety of mattresses, but to get the right one for you, take their sleep quiz that matches you to your perfect mattress based on body type and sleep preferences. Go to bearmattress.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL at checkout to get 40% off site-wide. This offer is not available anywhere else. You have to use my promo code on the very last page of checkout to get this discount. That's bearmattress.com. Use my promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get 40% off site-wide. Bearmattress.com, promo code LOCKEDONNHL.
Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Just wanted to say thank you to everyone for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen here to start off your day. For your second listen, make sure to go and check out the new Locked On NHL Game Night. Every game, every night, up until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned, you can get local analysis on a national scale. And you can easily find Locked On NHL Game Night now on YouTube or wherever you may be listening to your podcasts. Segment 3, time to get into another one of my Chicago Blackhawks season recaps. As a reminder, I've already dished out grades to Connor Bedard, Alex Vlasic, Ryan Donato, and Teuvo Teravainen. Make sure to go and check those out if you haven't done so already. Everything is always time-coded down in the description to make things easily accessible for you all. But today, I will be covering 30-year-old forward Tyler Bertuzzi, who played his first season here with the Blackhawks after signing a 4-year deal with them in the offseason at $5.5 million. He put up 43 points, 21 goals, and 22 assists in 80 games in his lone season with the Maple Leafs the year prior, and was, of course, brought in to give Connor Bedard some more support on the Blackhawks top line. Unfortunately, for whatever reasons, which left me ripping my hair out many times on my show throughout the course of the year, Connor Bedard and Tyler Bertuzzi didn't really spend all that much time playing with one another. I would say at most it was like 20 to 25 games. They never really were allowed to get comfortable with one another. And the reasoning for that, I'm not exactly sure, but I do think it's something we need to keep in mind when going through all of Tyler Bertuzzi's statistics. In 82 games this season for the Blackhawks, which, by the way, something to note in and alone of itself, Bertuzzi had he had actually never played 82 games in a single season. The last time he played an entire year, though, was the lockout shortened 2020 campaign, in which I believe he played 73 games, which was tied for the league lead, but was able to stay healthy from start to finish in totality in his first year as a member of the Blackhawks. 2 thumbs up for that. And in those 82 games, we saw Bertuzzi tally 23 goals and 23 assists for 46 points. Those 23 goals actually were the second most of his NHL career. So for that to happen, despite him not really played in his natural spot that I thought he was brought on to play, still wound up, scoring 23 goals for the Blackhawks this year, which is nothing to bat an eye at. Also chipped in with 23 assists, like I said, which is the most he's had in the last 3 years. And his 46 points was also the most he had tallied in the last 3 years. So while it was still kind of a disappointing year out of Tyler Bertuzzi a little bit, he still kind of carried his weight and had a pretty natural season for him, despite not getting as many top-line opportunities as I imagined here in his first year with the Hawks. As far as his plus-minus, pretty putrid, one of the worst on the team. Actually, I think it was the worst on the team. -39 plus-minus rating. For someone who wasn't playing with Connor Bedard all year up on the top line, and, averaging 20 to 23 minutes per game. This is a pretty bad number from Tyler Bertuzzi, and I do think is indicative of his play defensively because A, he's not a speedster, so he's not able to kind of recover and gain ground on defenders really easily. And also, I don't really think that's a side of the game he necessarily loves and has never been known for in his career. There were at times some lapses in effort defensively. Definitely something he needs to be better at to be a more complete player. This was one category. While again, plus minus is never a stat that truly tells you how a player fared. I do think this matches up with Bertuzzi's defensive prowess here this season. Also tallied 51 penalty minutes for a guy that doesn't really fight all that much. I would like him to clean up his decision-making, especially if he's not going to be making a consistent impact defensively. And then in terms of his even strength and power play production this year, 13 of his 23 goals were scored from the even strength variety. Not terrible stuff out of Bertuzzi, again, considering this role. And he usually is a pretty effective 5-on-5 scorer, as he scored 16 even strength goals 4 times in his NHL career. 10 power play goals this season were undoubtedly the most of his career by a wide margin, by 4. And that's where I think Bertuzzi was really the most effective, right around the net, scoring those greasy goals right out in front. He's really good at that. There is a skill in doing that, and that is where Tyler Bertuzzi absolutely shines. 13 even strength assists was definitely down for him, though. The playmaking was not there for Bertuzzi this year. Second lowest number of his NHL career. In terms of his shooting percentage, 17.6% on the season. Not all that surprising, though, considering he's not someone who fires a lot of wristers on net. Most of his shot attempts are coming from right out in the crease. And he actually had 131 shots this year, which is the 3rd most in his NHL career. Career average in shooting percentage, 14.5%. So probably won't, find the net at the same frequency next year, but hopefully he'll be getting a little bit more opportunities to do so. Time on ice, 16 minutes. It's the lowest Bertuzzi's had since his rookie year. I do think at times he didn't do himself favors with his effort and his defensive play, right? I think that's what led to him being buried in the lineup a little bit down on the 3rd and 4th line. But at the end of the day, this Blackhawks offense, up until the kids came onto the scene late, they really needed more help. And I think it was kind of foolish. I think it didn't benefit Tyler Bertuzzi whatsoever to punish him for bad play. He doesn't, to me, strike me as the type of guy who's going to respond to that stuff very well. 60 hits on the year. He had 38 more last year with the Maple Leafs. So not someone who's overtly physical either, despite, kind of playing with a little bit of an edge. 53 giveaways as well, 3rd most of his career, although I do think he was probably forced to play with the puck a bit more this season than he normally does. And then last but certainly not least, analytics. 45.1 Corsi for percentage for Bertuzzi at even strength. pretty decent actually for the Blackhawks forwards this year, but it's also the worst of his NHL career. Here's a real stat that Bertuzzi cannot dodge. Was on the ice for 40 goals for to 75 goals against at even strength this season. Ouch. 86.3 on ice save percentage for Blackhawks goaltenders when Bertuzzi was out there as well. Not very good. As far as his strengths and weaknesses, what do we learn about Tyler Bertuzzi in his first year with the Blackhawks? Well, make no mistake about it. His strengths are his net front presence, his hand-eye coordination, his ability to score greasy goals. He can work hard in corners, kind of muck things up out there. And I really do believe if you get Connor Bedard, another skill player on that top line that can work with him, Tyler Bertuzzi would be a great third piece to that top line. Just go and crash the net, put your stick there, bud. You're going to be a shoo-in for 25 goals. He's just got to raise the level of the rest of his game in order to get himself in those spots. His weaknesses, there's a decent amount of them too, and I think that was kind of my concern about giving Bertuzzi a 4-year deal at $5.5 million. The AAV isn't really the problem. That's fine. The Hawks need to spend money. 4 years didn't really make much sense to me for a player who is a slow skater, doesn't create for himself. He has low puck skills, is not a playmaker in the NHL. He's not reliable defensively. He's not an overtly physical guy. He lacks discipline sometimes. Like, why did we give him a 4-year contract? I completely think that Tyler Bertuzzi would have had a better type of season if they just left him with Connor Bedard all year like he should have been, but he also didn't do himself any favors, and he doesn't have great qualities outside of his net front presence that kind of leave me concerned about his long-term abilities. However, if you put him in an offensive-minded spot along with Connor Bedard, that's where he's going to shine. Outside of that, though, when Tyler Bertuzzi is brought on to provide this team more offense, I don't really see how he's going to do that in a third-line role when he's playing alongside guys who don't really create all that much, and he himself doesn't really create all that much. So I'm sure Tyler Bertuzzi was frustrated with his season. I'm sure he was frustrated with his role, as was I. There's a lot that goes into his first year with the Blackhawks, but ultimately, taking everything into consideration, yes, there were things I was definitely disappointed with Bertuzzi with, but he still had the second most goals of his career, played in all 82 games, and put up 46 points, which is one of the most productive seasons he's had in the last 5 years. So Bertuzzi did still do some good things throughout the course of the season, and for that, I'm ultimately going to give him a B-. Let me know in the comment section below if you think that B- is too high, too low, or spot on for Tyler Bertuzzi, and also let me know who you want to see me cover next on my Chicago Blackhawks season recaps. But that's going to take care of today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks, everyone. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Be sure to subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. Follow Locked On Blackhawks for free as well, wherever you may be listening to your podcasts. That way, you don't miss out on any of the latest episodes. Until tomorrow's show, everyone, enjoy the rest of your Wednesdays. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.